Hi guys, it's Mark from Leisure Industry Academy, and today we're going to be talking about the shoulder joint, and we're going to really be looking at the rotator cuff muscles that sit underneath the deltoid. Now we know the shoulder joint is a ball and socket joint, and this has 360-degree movement, and we also realize that a lot of injuries can occur at the shoulder joint. So we're going to have a look at the shoulder joint today, and we're going to look at the muscles. We're going to look at the bones and some of the ligaments that's actually in the shoulder joint. Okay, so when we look at the shoulder joint, we actually have got to look at a few things here. We've got to look at some of the bones that's attached, and we can see the humerus makes this up. And if we spin around to the back, we can also see right here, we can see the scapula makes this up. We can also see that the clavicle will make up part of the shoulder. So we can see the clavicle, the humerus, and obviously the scapula that lies underneath the deltoids. Now we're going to look at the bones that make up part of the shoulder girdle. So if we have a look here, we can see it's the humerus, we can see the clavicle, and if we spin the skeletal system round, we can see it's also the scapula. So between these three bones, we can see that these three make up part of the shoulder girdle. If we have a look at the skeleton, we can actually see that the roof of the shoulder is actually made up of something here called the acromion. It actually just sits right here, and it's also known as the acromion process. We can actually see that the shoulder is made up of four distinct joints. The first one we can see here is called the glenohumeral joint, and it's right here where the humerus goes into the scapula. And if I just remove the humerus, we can actually see it's like a ball-like surface. Some people say it looks like a half of a golf ball. Then if we pop the humerus back in again, you can see how it sits inside the half-shaped golf ball called the glenohumeral joint. The acromion clavicular joint will meet up here. It's also known as the AC joint, and this is where we can see the clavicular, which is your clavicle, and the acromion actually meet just right in between here and here. We also have the sternoclavicular. What we can actually see is here to here is your sternoclavicular. So what we can see is that is your SC joint. And what this does, that helps support the limbs, the upper limbs to the upper body. We also have a false joint where the shoulder blade glides against the rib cage. If I just remove the left humerus of the body. Now this joint is really important because without the proper functioning of the muscles, then this shoulder joint will not be stable. So we've got to make sure the muscles surrounding the shoulder joint remain stable. As you've learned during your level 3 personal training course with Leisure Industry Academy, ligaments attach bone to bone. Now we all know a ligament's job is to stop bone from excessively moving. So what we're going to do now, we're going to look at the shoulder joint, and we're going to look at some of the ligaments that's in and around the shoulder joint. Now you can see here there's quite a lot of complex ligaments involved in keeping the shoulder stable. You can see from our 360-degree movement. It's just looking from inside the ribs. However, there's a couple of key ones that we're going to have a look at now. Okay, so here we can see the left clavicle. We can actually see the left acromion clavicular capsule. And we can see how that sits in and around the clavicle. Again, that's just called the left AC capsule. And again, if we put on the AC ligament, can actually see how that sits along the top and attaches the clavicle to the scapula. Okay, so remember the scapula comes all the way around the back here, comes round, the clavicle is joined by the AC ligament. Okay, now what we can see the coracoid process that sits here. This actually sits out of the scapula. If we can just remove the humerus, we can see that. So this little bone sticks out. And remove it and put it back. You can actually see is the coracoid process. Now within this, we can actually see that there's going to be some ligaments that's attached to keep the coracoid process. Okay, now what we can see that there's a ligament that attaches the scapula to the shoulder blade through something called the coracoid process ligament. And that can be seen if I can just attach that ligament. Again, we can see the two ligaments just attached here and here. What that will do, that will stop excess movement, as we can see from the position that both ligaments are in. Basically, this coracoid process is just a bony knob that sticks out, and that's what attaches the ligaments. Okay, what this doesn't show is the glenoid labrum. Okay, what we can see here is the glenoid fossa, and basically that just means it's like golf ball shaped. The labrum is almost completely attached around the outside of the glenoid fossa. If we think about the labrum, it's completely attached around the outside of the glenoid. The labrum is also where the bicep tendon actually goes into the glenoid. The labrum is also where the bicep actually goes in and sits into the glenoid. Remember that the tendon is different from the ligament. So a tendon will attach muscle to bone, where ligaments obviously attach bone to bone. So we can see that the bicep muscle runs from the front of the shoulder all the way through and into the glenoid. So what we can actually see is the biceps tendon comes up and over the top of the humerus and actually forms part of the labrum. Now on the shoulder we actually have a look, and there's one single tendon that makes up the rotator cuff. So that's one single tendon that actually joins under the humerus. It's called the rotator tendon. This rotator tendon is made up of distinct muscles, 4 distinct muscles, and I'll name them and I'll show you. Now we can remember this by using the acronym SITS, S-I-T-S, SITS. The first one we can see will be the supraspinatus. The second one we will see will be infraspinatus. The third one we will see will be teres minor. And the fourth one will be subscapularis, also called subscap, which actually sits underneath. And the fourth one we will see will be called the subscapularis, also known as subscap. So these 4 muscles make up the rotator cuff. Now the rotator cuff and muscles are not just for movement, but they also create stability within the shoulder joint. This is done by the muscles contracting tightly and holding the head of the humerus within the glenoid fossa. So it holds tight within the fossa. So these muscles will pull back and keep the head of the humerus stable within the socket. Now, on top of the rotator cuff muscles, we obviously have the big, powerful deltoid muscles. Now, these muscles are the most powerful muscles we've got within the shoulder. And of course, these are the muscles that when people go to the gym, they normally work out by doing shoulder press, lat raise, things like that. We put the deltoids on. You can just see the shape and how the deltoid sits. By clicking infraspinatus, you can see how infraspinatus sits underneath the deltoid. Now by clicking the deltoid, I'll give you a 3D version. We can see how the deltoid actually sits under the humerus here. So this is the big powerful muscle of the shoulder. Okay, so the first rotator cuff muscle we're going to look at will be the supraspinatus when we're referring to joint actions. And you can see here how the supraspinatus sits. Because it's coming here through and sits on the top of the humerus, a contraction can only cause abduction, abduction. So it creates abduction and stabilizes the shoulder joint. So an exercise that would be like a lat raise. So anything lifting the arm up towards the side would cause abduction. Now we can see infraspinatus. Now because of the location where we can see it sits, it's here on the shoulder blade coming around onto the humerus. We can see a contraction can only cause one action. And that action is lateral rotation of the humerus. So we see if that muscle shortens, the whole humerus is going to have to laterally rotate. So that's from the palms facing forward. So that would be if your palms were facing towards your thighs, lateral rotation would be the moving out. It would be a supination action. An exercise where you could work lateral rotation would be lying on your side on a bench using a dumbbell and laterally rotating the humerus to work the rotator cuff, specifically infraspinatus. Now what we can also see is teres minor also plays a similar role to infraspinatus. We can see how both of them sit very similar the way they sit. So their actions are also going to be very similar. If I just highlight, take away infraspinatus and just show teres minor, we can see how it sits, and a contraction because it sits posteriorly will also make lateral rotation of the humerus. And finally we have subscapularis. We can see sits under the scapula. Again we can look to see where the muscle sits in relation to the humerus, and a contraction which will be a shortening of the muscle. Try and work out what action that would be from shortening. Would that be laterally rotating or medially rotating? That would be medially rotating. The muscle would shorten, it would contract, therefore the arm, i.e. the humerus, would medially rotate. That would be a pronation. And there we have the 4 rotator cuff muscles. If I put them back on for you, we can see infraspinatus, we can see supraspinatus, and we can see teres minor. So muscle actions are really important when it comes to shoulder joint actions. Good luck with your exam.